Hello everyone, welcome to our video deploying infrastructure automatically to the cloud using Ansible and Azure Pipelines. In this video, we are going to see a complete tutorial for how to automate the creation of the infrastructure using infrastructure as code with Ansible and Azure Pipeline. So first, I will give you an overview about the demo workflow. This will give you better idea and abstraction of all the steps in the demo. Also, during the workflow, I will explain and give more knowledge about the component and the configuration. So it is not just the workflow, but I will also explain and describe many things on this component and configuration during explaining the workflow. Then we will go for the demo. But first, let me give you a quick introduction about myself. My name is Mohammed Radwan. I'm a developer technologies MVP and principal DevOps consultant. I have been doing software development for more than 15 years now, worked on several projects for different enterprise customers across different regions and countries. I heavily participated in the community, developed several frameworks, presented many sessions, holding various certificates for Azure and DevOps. I started back in 2002 as a classic ASP developer, relocated multiple times in multiple countries, worked with several technologies and for different roles and positions. And for the last 8 years, I moved to consultancy-based role where I focused more on helping different companies, some of them from the Fortune 500, to improve their software development and delivery using DevOps and automation. I have developed and authored several frameworks, command line tools, and guides. You can find them on GitHub and Azure DevOps Marketplace. I like to share my experience. This is why I have a YouTube channel and blog where they have hundreds of videos and posts that share different topics from my real experience. I have presented many sessions in several user group conferences, events, and customer site as well in different countries. So I got the chance and the opportunity to work in different culture, project size, and company size as well, which helped me to have different experience. Here are some links for my activities. Okay, so we will start the demo workflow on my client machine. I have my Windows machine with a Git bash installed, so I can use a Git bash as a terminal connection to a remote Linux machine. And the next step is to start logging to my Azure portal and start creating resource group and start creating a remote Linux machine. I need an Ubuntu machine because I want to use this machine as a remote Ansible machine. So I will create this machine. I need port 22 open so I can communicate to this machine with the SSH. Once I complete creation of the machine, I will log into the machine from my local machine using the SSH and the username and password. And then the first step is to start installing and configure Ansible on this machine. So I will prepare this machine to be a remote Ansible machine. Once I complete the configuration and the installation of Ansible, and part of that also is to install the Azure SDK for Ansible and test my virtual machine to make sure that Ansible is running correctly. And then I will start configuring the authentication from that machine to my Azure subscription. I need to create a credentials file inside the virtual machine so this virtual machine can has access to my Azure subscription because it's going to create an infrastructure on my Azure subscription, so I need to give permission to that virtual machine. So I just create credentials file, and then after that, I will generate a pair RSA keys, private and public key. After that, this machine is ready. Then I will go for Azure DevOps and then navigate to the project setting and start using the private key to create a service connection. The main idea here, I need to make Azure Pipeline have authentication to the virtual machine so it can communicate with the virtual machine, because I will use Azure Pipeline to execute Ansible Playbook remotely on the Ansible virtual machine. So I need to authenticate to have a permission, the pipeline to that machine. Once I complete that, I will run a continuous integration build pipeline. And since this is a Java application, it will start the Maven task, which will start doing all the tasks inside the POM or the project object model, which is restoring all the dependencies, running all the unit tests, and so on. And then at the end, it just creating the Java package, which is a WAR file. After creating the package, then storing the package on Azure DevOps artifacts, so it can be ready for the CD or the continuous deployment pipeline. Also, it will store the Ansible playbook on the same artifacts, so it can also be ready to be picked up by the continuous deployment pipeline. So what is the Ansible Playbook.yml? So the Ansible Playbook.yml is just the infrastructure as code using the Ansible with YAML configuration. So this describing all the infrastructure that will be created using the pipeline. So it's just a metadata that describing the infrastructure. The main idea here is that the continuous deployment pipeline needs the Ansible playbook so it can create the infrastructure needed to deploy my application and then picks the package to deploy that package to the created infrastructure. So this will be available on the artifacts for the continuous deployment pipeline. And then I will just run the continuous deployment pipeline. The main idea here first, the pipeline will pick up the Ansible playbook, which is the YAML file, and then start running that remotely on the remote Ansible virtual machine. And this execution will start creating the infrastructure described in the YAML playbook, which will first create an Azure service plan, and then web app and MySQL database, and then also configure a firewall rule to allow Azure web app to access MySQL database. Once the infrastructure is created and ready, then the pipeline will start to pick up the package and then deploy that package to the web app, which is a WAR file, and then extracting all the Java file into the web app. So the web app now has all my application deploying, and then this application will use the MySQL database. Then after that, I can open the web application from the browser and navigating to the hotel sample application and even log into that and see all the data that loaded from the application and the database. So let's now go for the demo. So let's first see the project, the demo generator. And this is the project that I will use during the demo, Smart Hotel. And this is the architecture of the application. And this is the application, which is web application and mobile application as well, but we will use only the web. So let's navigate to the demo generator, sign in. And then here I will choose the template, navigate to DevOps Lab, and then choose Ansible and select this template. Then here I will select the desired organization. So as we can see, I need two Azure Pipeline 2 extension to be installed on the target Azure DevOps organization, which is Ansible and Replace Token. So let's open both of them so I can install them on the organization, get it for free. And here I will select the target organization and click install. Now it's complete. Let's install the Replace Token. The same organization and click install. Now it's complete. And now let's refresh that. So we can see that now the two extension installed and my organization is ready to create this project template. So I will just name the project Ansible project and create project. So this will create all the artifacts of the project, including the work items and build definition and so on. So let's now refresh the Azure DevOps. So we can see the Ansible project created. Let's now navigate to repos. Here's a project, and we can see this is the source, the main source. And we can see it's an MVC application using Java. So let's navigate out to the Azure resources. So I can execute Ansible Playbook on a remote machine. And this machine needs to have installed suites needed for the desired cloud providers. And in our case, as I'm going to work with Azure Cloud, so I need to have an Azure suite on the remote machine. So I need to have a remote machine, which will be a Linux VM, which has an Ansible installed and configured, as well as Azure Suite for the Azure cloud providers. So I will start the step by preparing that machine. So the first step is to start creating the service principal. You can watch this video for more information about Docker, containerization, and where and how Docker can fit with DevOps and CI/CD pipelines. In order to do that, I will open the Cloud Shell. So this will load the Cloud Shell. Let's clear the screen. And then I will type this command to create the service principal with the name service principal rad1. This will generate the service principal and create the service principal. And I will open a new notepad and copy the output in the notepad because I will use it later. And then type the command Azure account show, which will show the Azure subscription information. Also, I will copy this information to the notepad. Copy and put it in the same notepad. And now I'm going to create the information that I will use for the authentication. So here I will create these values, the subscription ID, the client ID, secret, tenant, and then I will copy this information from here. So for example, the app ID, it will be the client ID, and the secret is the password. And of course, the tenant from the Azure subscription. So prepare this information. Then the next step is to create the virtual machine with Linux or Ubuntu. I can use this link, which will create a VM with Linux and Ansible installed and configured, but I prefer to show all the steps from the beginning on how to create the virtual machine and how to install and configure Ansible on the machine. So I will start that by creating a clean Linux machine. So let's close this link. You can use it if you want. Then navigate here to resource group and then click create and choose Ubuntu. And here I will create new resource group called RG Demo Rad1. And I will name the machine VM Linux. Here, the location, I will choose UK South. I prefer a fast machine with 16 RAM. And I choose with username and password, the username mrad1, and I put a strong password. And I will leave the port 22 for SS connection opened. Then click review and create. And then click create. So this will create the Ubuntu machine. Let's navigate back to the resource group. Just to give some time and click refresh. So now I have the resource group and we can see that the VM is still in the process. Just to give a few minutes and it will be ready. Now it's completed. Let's click on the virtual machine. And now I will copy the public IP of the machine and open the git bash. Then I will type the SSH, my name or the username at the public IP. Click enter, then type yes. And then here I will type the password I created while I create the VM. Now it's complete and let's clear that. So if I type Python version, we can see version 2 Python installed. Also Python 3 is installed as well. So by default, this template has Python 2 and Python 3 installed. But if I type Ansible and version, we can see that Ansible is not recognized, which means that Ansible is not installed in this machine. So let's install Ansible and configure Ansible. So let's clear the screen. So here, first I will update and upgrade the package management for the Linux. So to make sure that update all the repository URLs and also the package management software. So this will update and upgrade the package management for the Linux machine. And then I will install here Python pipe, which is the prerequisite for the Ansible library. So this will take some time. Of course, I speed up all this. And then now I'm going to install the Ansible and Azure suite. So this will install both Ansible and the Azure suite on this virtual machine. And this will using the pipe, the prerequisite. So now Ansible installed. So if now let's clear the screen, and if I type here Ansible version, we can see now I have version 2.92 installed. Let's clear that. So first I need to configure this virtual machine to have authorized access to Azure. And in order to do that, the first step, I need to create a directory .azure and then create a credentials file. And using Nano, which is the editor, and I will copy the values that I used with the service principals and the Azure subscription tenant and ID and secret. So I will use it in the credentials file and save that file. So Control X to exit, save, double check that my file are saved. I will generate SSH public and private key pair. So this will generate a private and public key in the default location. The private key is ID underscore RSA, and the public key is ID underscore RSA.pub, which is public. The passphrase, it is recommended to have a strong passphrase, but in our demo, I will not use any passphrase, so I will leave it empty. Then I need to change the permission for the key. Then I will use chmod 755 SSH. The chmod change the mode. This restrict the way a file can be accessed. And it has different values for the mode. For example, 755, the file command, you allow everyone to read and execute, and the owner can the only one to write to this file. Of course, we have different numbers which has different capabilities. For example, there is number for allowing everyone to read and write. There is some other to only read and so on. So it is based on the number with that permission. After I change the permission to the keys, I want to install these keys on the authorized keys. And the first step is to change the timestamp of the authorized keys on this server, and I will use the touch command in this way, touch SSH authorized keys, and then changing the permission for authorized keys, so I get the permission to, I can install a key in the authorized keys by using change mode 644, which means that change authorized keys so we can install the new key. 644 only owner can write, other can read. Once I have that, now I want to copy the private key to the output, and I will use the SSH copy ID and my username, and this will ask me for my password. So this will copy the private key to the output, so I can copy that. You can watch this video for more information about Kubernetes cluster, how to deploy Docker image to Azure Kubernetes service, and how to configure CI/CD pipelines for an end-to-end development and deployment scenario. In order to make Azure Pipeline to run the Ansible Playbook remotely on the Ansible VM, we need to authenticate Azure Pipeline to the Ansible VM. And in order to do that, we will create a service connection on Azure DevOps with the private key to authenticate the Azure Pipeline to the Ansible VM. So let's navigate to the project settings. Here, I go for project settings. Let's open a new instance. And we go for the service connection and just create a new service connection, search for SSH, and then here click next. And here I will put the private key. So let's navigate to the git bash and copy the private key here with all spaces and copy and paste it here. Just remove the carriage return. And here I will put the username and the password. I use them while I created the virtual machine. And here I will just name my connection Ansible machine connection, so I can distinguish that with different connection. Here I will put the SSH port 22. Then navigate to get the virtual machine IB to put it here. And then save this service connection. So now I have the service connection. Let's navigate to the Ansible Playbook configuration file. So I will open the repo and Ansible script and open the web app YAML, which is the Ansible configuration file. So this is the Ansible configuration file, which describes the infrastructure as code for our environment or infrastructure on Azure. It uses the YAML format. So let's understand how this file is structured. So as we can see, this is creating the resource group, and here create the service plan, and here the backend, which is MySQL. This is the variables, and we can see here we have prefix and suffix, which will be used. So we will replace that using the variables in the pipeline. I will show you that later, but let's first edit the playbook. The first I will change here the name to be Windows because the service plan is Windows, not Linux. And then I will go here and change the end IP address of the firewall rule. To just explain that in order to make MySQL available to be connected by the web app, I need to create a firewall rule on MySQL with a starting IP, all of them 0 and the end of 0, which means that allow other Azure resources to connect to that backend. So I need to fix that on the YAML file. Now let's commit this change. And now let's navigate now to the pipeline. Here I will open the continuous integration pipeline, click edit. So as we can see, this will run using the Ubuntu 16.04, and the Maven build will use the POM or the project object model because this is a Java application, and the POM will explain all the dependencies of the project. Restoring the Maven will restore all the package that listed in the POM file, also running all the unit testing, the package will be created, and many others. So the Maven build will run all that. And then here, this task will just copy the Java application package, which is the Word file, and also the YAML file, which is the Ansible configuration file and infrastructure as code, to copy that to be available for the artifacts. So this task will search for all the var and YAML and copy them. And the next task is to actually copy them to the drop folder on the artifacts in this location. The main idea here that we want to store the package of the web app, which is the Word file, because this is a Java application, and also the Ansible configuration file or infrastructure as code, because the continuous deployment pipeline need to pick them in order to understand what is the infrastructure to create, and then create the infrastructure, then pick the web package, which is the Word file, and deploy that package into the web application created. So let's now queue a build, and I will run the build. So this is the build from outside. So let's open a new instance so we can see that from inside and outside. Let's see that from inside. So this is a moving build task, and here from outside. So it will create all the instruction in the project object model. You can watch this video for more information about Git with animation. You will see different animated commands like branch, merge, rebase, cherry pick, and many others. Now let's copy the var and the YAML file or the Ansible configuration, and here in the artifact, let's open that. And we can see now I have here, this is the Ansible configuration file, the infrastructure as code, the playbook, and also I have here the web package, which is a war. I can also access the artifacts from the build from here under the published. So it is the same location. So let's navigate now to the release pipeline and select the Ansible CD and click edit and click the tasks. So as we can see, we have 3 tasks. The first one is a replace token. So this replace token will search inside my repo for all the YAML extension file and start replacing all the token with the variables value in the variable section in the pipeline. So let's open that. So as we can see, it will look at all of these value like location, my SQL admin, my SQL admin secret, and so on, and replace that with the value here. And of course, to understand it is variable or it is just a keyword by the prefix and suffix in the playbook file. I need to change this value to put here in the data center that's close to me. Here I will put my username. This is for my SQL database backend. And here just a password for the database. And here just the name of the SQL server. This required to be unique, so I will just add my name to make sure it's unique and also add my name to the web app. Then I will get back to the tasks. So this is the replacement token. As we can see, the prefix and the suffix, the words, which mean that this is variable. This is not a keyword inside the file, which will be replaced by the value for these variables. The same here for my SQL admin and so on. So let's navigate to the tasks. Next task is the run playbook Ansible task. This task will run the Ansible playbook on the remote Ansible virtual machine. And in order to do that, I just need first to identify the connection, the service connection to that machine, which is the Ansible machine connection that we created earlier using the SSH private key. And as we can see, this will be a remote machine, but the source of the playbook will be the current machine, the agent machine, because the pipeline will pick up the Ansible playbook configuration file or the infrastructure as code from the artifacts and download that on the pipeline. And here, I just need to choose here host lists. This is the way that I'm going to run my playbook. And here in the host list, I will put the IP of the remote Ansible virtual machine. So let's copy the public IP of that machine, get back here and just put it. Now this is complete. Let's go for the third task, Azure App Service Deploy. This is the task that will deploy the WAR or the Java Web Application package into the web app created by the Ansible Playbook. So first I need to authorize my pipeline to the Azure so it can deploy that. So this will just authorize and log in with my username and password. Just type my password and just give few seconds. So this now authorized. And then here I will just, as we can see here, set the app settings in the web app configuration. So I using here the value in the variables in the pipeline, like the database username and the password and the web app name. So I can configure the connection string in the app settings, all of these values from the variables, which will be created the resources. So now it's ready, and remember it is using hosted Visual Studio 2017 because the app service deployment will use the MS deploy, which is run on a Windows machine, not on a Linux machine. The playbook will run on the remote Linux machine, but the MS deploy will run on the agent machine, which require Windows machine. So now let's save that. And before create a new release, let's navigate to the Azure resource to look at the current Azure resources. So let's get back here and click resource groups. So this is the current resource groups. Let's refresh. Now get the pipeline and create a new release. And here I will select the previous build that I used in the previous task, which published the web package, WAR file, and the Ansible Playbook on the artifacts. So the pipeline can understand from where to pick up the package and the Ansible Playbook configuration file. Let's create. And now let's open a new release view instance, 2 releases, one from outside and one to see that from inside. Then I click here. So this is outside. We can see one of 3 tasks. And here, this is the inside. So here to just download the Ansible and the web package. And now start running the playbook remotely on the machine. So as we can see, the pipeline starts downloading the artifacts, which is the playbook, on the agent machine and running the Ansible playbook remotely on the Linux virtual machine. And the first step here is to create the resource group. This is from outside. It's 4 of 5 tasks. So as we can see here, create the service plan. So let's navigate to the resource group so we can see the created resource group. Let's click refresh. As we can see now, the Ansible resource group created. If I navigate here, we can see the service plan even created, which is a Windows service plan, the infrastructure for the web app. Let's navigate back here to the pipeline. Now it's creating MySQL server. This will take some time. Let's refresh now. As we can see now, it's created the Azure web app, but MySQL is not created yet. It is still in the process of creating the back end of MySQL. Just to give some time, of course, I speed all of that. Now it's created and working on the firewall rule and also creating the database on the MySQL Server database. And now it's deploying the application. So all the infrastructure created and now the deployment, the WAR file into the web application. So this deploying all the WAR file, extracting them. Now it's completed. So if I navigate back here, refresh. So now we can see that I have MySQL database created. This is MySQL. And also, as we saw, the firewall rule opened. So if I open here the web app and navigate to the configuration, and we can see that I have now all the configuration settings. This is the password, I put it. Let's navigate outside. And if I open now the MySQL to see the firewall rule, connection security, we can see the firewall rule is on because usually by default, if I didn't creating this firewall rule, it will be off, which means that the web app will not be able to access MySQL database. Let's navigate back here and open my web app and click browse. So it will take some time and then loading the web app with the backend on MySQL. So let's here put the username me and smart hotel with password 1234. Click login. So now I log into the application, which is a smart hotel. And we can see the application is running, loading the data from the database, and it looks fine. At the end, I would like to thank you for watching the video. Please, if you have any question or comment, don't hesitate to reach out. You can find more information on my blog, which will appear at the end of the video, along with some other related video. Thank you.